Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling something super practical and honestly something I think we all can use from time to time,
Absolutely.
which is how to communicate effectively in English, specifically in healthcare settings.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're talking about going to the doctor, explaining what's wrong, maybe even ending up in the hospital,
Mhm.
and then going to the pharmacy to get your medicine,
All in English.
all in English,
Yeah.
all while maybe not feeling your best.
Right, exactly.
And you've provided us with some really useful resources for this, like actual phrases and dialogues that cover all of these situations.
Yeah, I think these are going to be really valuable for our listeners because they're really common scenarios that can sometimes feel a little bit intimidating, especially when you're trying to communicate in a language that might not be your native tongue.
Exactly. And that's kind of the mission here, right? To give people the tools and the confidence to navigate these situations effectively and ultimately feel a bit more at ease.
Yeah, for sure. Because when you're not feeling well, the last thing you want to worry about is struggling to communicate your needs.
Exactly. So let's dive into these four scenarios. We've got making those doctor's appointments, describing what's ailing you, when you actually see the doctor figuring out how to book a hospital bed if that becomes necessary, and then, of course, those pharmacy visits.
To me.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning.
Okay.
Booking that doctor's appointment, I mean, that's usually the first hurdle.
Right. And, just knowing how to initiate that conversation can sometimes feel like a little bit of a challenge in itself.
Absolutely, and the resources you provided actually offer some really clear and direct phrases for doing just that.
Yeah, they're great.
Like, for instance, you can start by saying something as simple as, "Hello, I'd like to book an appointment with a doctor."
Straight to the point.
Straight to the point, right?
Right.
Or let's say you need to see someone more urgently. You could ask, "Is there any doctor available today?" Or if you have a specific time constraint, you could
Mhm.
say, "Can I see the doctor in the evening?"
Yeah, I like how those examples really cover those different situations that people might find themselves in.
They do. And they're also really polite and respectful, which is always important in these settings.
Definitely. I think in most English-speaking healthcare environments, clarity and politeness go a long way.
Agreed. And to see how this might actually play out in a real conversation,
Mm.
we have that simulated dialogue from one of the resources.
Right. That's a good one.
Okay, so let's say you call up the clinic, and the receptionist answers, "Good morning. Welcome to City Clinic. How can I help you?"
Very standard opening. You hear that all the time.
And then you could use one of those phrases we just discussed, like,
Yeah.
"Hi, I'd like to book an appointment with a doctor."
Boom, right there. Which
And then, of course, they're going to ask for a little more information.
Right, like, sure, what is the issue? Something along those lines.
Exactly. And here, you can simply state the reason for your visit, something like, "I have a fever and a sore throat."
Keeping it concise and to the point.
Yeah, no need to go into a whole medical history just yet.
Right, and then based on that information, the receptionist might say, okay, the general physician is available at 4 p.m. Would that work for you?
Giving you a concrete time slot.
Yeah, and if that works for you, you can just say, yes, that's fine.
Now, here's something that I think a lot of people might not think to ask, but it's really helpful. Can I get the doctor's name?
Ooh, that's a good one. I actually forget to do that
Me
sometimes.
too. But it's good to know who you're going to be seeing.
Yeah, it's useful for your own records and in case you need to call back.
And the receptionist would likely respond with, "Yes, you'll be seeing Dr. Mehta," or whoever it may be.
Perfect. And then you can end the call politely with a great thank you.
Easy peasy.
Right. So, looking back at that interaction, I think a couple of key takeaways emerge.
Yeah. What would you say those are?
Well, first, like we said, just being direct about your purpose from the get-go, like stating that you want to book an appointment really makes things smoother.
Cut to the chase.
Exactly. And then
Mhm.
being a little bit flexible with your scheduling, sometimes those appointment slots fill up quickly. So having a couple of preferred times in mind can make it easier to find something that fits your schedule.
So you've got the appointment booked.
All right. Next step.
Now you actually have to see the doctor and explain what's wrong.
Right. This is where being able to describe your symptoms clearly and accurately becomes super important.
And thankfully, those resources we have provide a bunch of phrases that are really helpful for this.
Yeah, they're like little scripts for your health.
So you can start by saying something general like, "Doctor, I have been feeling unwell for the past few days," just to set the stage.
Gives them some context.
And then you can get more specific with phrases like, "I have a high fever and a headache," or "I feel weak and tired all the time."
Those are really common symptoms that people experience, so those are good ones to know.
And they're clear and easy to understand, which is crucial when you're not feeling your best.
For sure. And to see how these phrases might work in a real conversation, let's look at that simulated doctor-patient dialogue.
Okay, so the doctor might start by asking, "Hello, how are you feeling today?"
The classic opening line.
And that's your cue to use one of those phrases like, "Doctor, he's dead. I've been feeling unwell for the past few days." And that'll likely prompt the doctor to ask, "What symptoms do you have?"
Trying to narrow it down.
And this is where you list those specific complaints like, "I have a high fever, headache, and sore throat."
Nice and clear.
Yeah, no ambiguity there.
Right. And the doctor might then ask something like, do you have any other issues? Just to make sure they haven't missed anything.
Kind of like a catch-all.
Exactly. And in this example, the patient adds, yes, I feel weak and tired all the time, providing another important detail.
So then the doctor might say, "Okay, let me check your temperature and blood pressure." Moving on to the physical exam.
It's the hands-on part.
And then after checking, they might say something like, "Your temperature is 101 degrees. You have a fever."
Confirming one of those reported symptoms.
And the patient, understandably, might react with, "Oh, that's high. What should I do?"
A very natural response.
And the doctor might then offer some advice like, "I'll prescribe some medicines. You should also drink plenty of fluids and take rest."
Combining medical treatment and self-care.
And here's where I think it's great for the patient to be proactive and ask, "Okay, doctor, should I take any tests?"
Absolutely. Being involved in your own healthcare is so important.
And the doctor might respond with, "Yes, I recommend a blood test to check for infection," giving you a clear rationale.
Very helpful.
And the patient could then say something like, "All right, I'll get that done. Thank you, doctor," showing agreement and appreciation.
So what do you think stands out in this conversation?
I think it's really cool how the patient is actively participating. They're not just answering questions, they're asking their own clarifying things and really engaging in the conversation.
I totally agree. It's a true back and forth, which I think is really essential for effective healthcare.
All right, so let's say the doctor recommends a hospital stay.
Oh, okay.
Maybe your condition requires it.
Yeah, those resources have some good phrases for that scenario, too.
They do things like, "I need to book a bed for my treatment," stating your need clearly.
Right to the point.
Or if you have a preference, do you have any private rooms available?
I like that one.
And, of course, the very practical, what is the cost of a general ward?
Money matters.
Especially in healthcare.
Absolutely. So to see how this might unfold, let's look at the hospital admission dialogue.
So the receptionist might greet you with, "Hello, how can I assist you?"
Standard greeting.
And you could respond with something like, "Hi, the doctor advised me to stay in the hospital. I need to book a bed," you know, giving them the context right away.
Sets the scene.
And then they'll probably ask about your preferences, like,
Mm.
"Sure, do you prefer a private room or a general ward?"
Private versus shared.
And you can ask about the cost. What is the cost of a general ward?
Getting the financial details.
And they might say, a general ward costs $100 per day, and a private room costs $300 per day.
So you can compare.
And then you make your decision, "I'll take a general ward,"
Simple as that.
and then the paperwork begins. "Okay, please fill out this admission form."
The inevitable forms.
And after filling it out, you might ask, "Here you go. When can I shift to the ward?"
Wanting to know the timeline.
And they might say, "In about 30 minutes, a nurse will assist you."
Managing expectations.
And you can end with a polite, "Thank you."
Smooth sailing so far.
So in this particular scenario, I think the key is really understanding those different room types and not being shy about asking about the costs involved.
Yeah, knowing your options and the associated fees can definitely help you make informed decisions and potentially avoid any financial surprises.
Okay, so we've covered doctor's appointments, hospital stays, and now for the final stop on our healthcare journey,
The pharmacy.
the pharmacy, where we get our much-needed medicines.
And knowing the right English phrases here can really help you get what you need and understand how to take your medications correctly.
Absolutely. So the resources we have suggest some great phrases for this. You can simply say, "I need to buy these medicines," especially if you have a prescription.
Keeps it straightforward.
Or for over-the-counter stuff, you could ask, "Do you have paracetamol for fever?" or whatever it is you need.
And of course, the crucial question once you get your medicine, how many times should I take this medicine?
Never forget to ask that one.
Seriously, it's so important for taking your meds safely and effectively.
So let's jump into that simulated interaction at the medical store.
Let's do it.
You walk up to the counter, hand them the prescription, and say, "Hello, I need to buy these medicines."
Nice and clear.
And the chemist might say, "Sure, let me check. Yes, we have all the medicines."
That's good news.
Always a relief. And then you ask that all-important question, "Great, How many times should I take this medicine?
Gotta make sure.
And the chemist provides clear instructions like the antibiotic should be taken twice a day and the fever medicine every 6 hours.
Being very specific.
And then thinking ahead, you might ask, okay, do I need to take them before or after meals?
Smart thinking.
Because sometimes that matters.
It really does.
And the chemist will clarify that too.
Right?
The antibiotic is after meals, and the fever medicine is before meals.
Love that clarity.
And you confirm, got it.
Feeling confident.
And then you wrap things up with, how much is the total cost?
The money question.
And the chemist might say, $25 in total.
And you make the payment. Here's the cash. Thank you.
So what would you say is the main takeaway from this pharmacy interaction?
I think it highlights how important it is to not only get your medicines, but to also actively seek out and understand the instructions for how to take them.
Don't be afraid to ask those clarifying questions.
Exactly. The pharmacist is there to help you.
So we've covered a lot today, haven't we?
We have really a full healthcare journey.
From booking that appointment to describing your symptoms to navigating hospital admission and finally getting those prescriptions filled.
All in English.
All in English.
Yeah.
And through each scenario, we've explored specific phrases and how they might be used in real conversations.
Our hope is that this has given you some practical tools and, more importantly, a better sense of how these interactions typically work in English-speaking settings.
Absolutely. The goal is to empower you to communicate effectively in these sometimes stressful situations, which can ultimately lead to better care and greater peace of mind.
Couldn't agree more.
So as you go about your day, maybe think about the next time you might be in one of these healthcare situations, even if it's just a routine checkup.
Yeah, just think about it.
How might this new awareness of the language and the communication flow make that experience feel different? Perhaps a little less daunting, a little more in your control?
I think that's a great point to end on. Feeling prepared can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me today for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, take care, everyone.